My family won $200 K and told me there was nothing left. I was cut out 'cause I'm a half-sibling. Then I found secret Zoom calls where my aunt said I wasn't really family. So I tracked the lawyer and requested something they never expected. I was standing in my car, in the parking lot behind my job, staring at my phone screen while my hands shook. I just finished listening to a voicemail from the estate lawyer who handled my late grandmother's will, the one my family swore had already been settled months ago. Except according to him, it wasn't settled for me. Apparently, I was technically excluded, per my grandmother's updated request. But here's the thing, I knew my grandma. She raised me as much as my dad did. She taught me how to drive, paid for my braces, and used to tell me that blood isn't what makes family. And now, I was being told that I didn't count as one of her grandchildren because I was my dad's kid from his first marriage. My half-siblings, two of them, both younger, had gotten $200 K to split between them. My dad and aunt told me there wasn't anything left, that grandma had barely had savings after her care home bills. But this voicemail proved it was a lie. The lawyer even sounded hesitant when he said it. "I'm sorry, but your name wasn't included in the final will. Your aunt and father handled all revisions before submission." Handled all revisions. That phrase sat in my stomach like poison. I scrolled through my messages with my dad. Every "love you," every half-hearted, "you'll understand when you're older," every excuse for why they couldn't help with my car repairs last month, all of it burned now. But the real hit came later that night. My cousin accidentally sent me a link to a family Zoom call. I clicked it before realizing what it was. There was my aunt, my dad, and both my half-siblings laughing about something. I was about to leave when I heard my aunt say it. She was always more of an outsider anyway. Her mother's blood, not ours. The will should reflect the real family. And my dad didn't say a damn word. He just nodded. That was the moment something broke in me, because I realized they didn't just forget about me. They erased me. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I reached out to the lawyer directly. I told him I had questions about the timing of the will changes, the signatures, and especially about who was present when those final revisions were made. He hesitated, said he'd have to check what he was allowed to disclose. But he did confirm one thing, something small, something that flipped everything I thought I knew about my family. The document was signed remotely, over video, but I still have the recording. A video. Of the day they changed my grandmother's will, and I could already feel it in my bones, something about that recording wasn't going to match their story. Because my grandma would never cut me out, not unless someone made sure she did. That's when I decided I was going to find out exactly what they did. And once I had proof, I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to make them regret ever thinking I wasn't family. I grew up in Modesto, California, not exactly the kind of place you get to reinvent yourself. My dad married my mom when he was 20, had me at 21, and left when I was 6. He met my stepmom, Lori, a few months later. She already had a daughter, and then she and my dad had 2 more kids together. From that point on, I was the weekend kid. Every other Saturday, I'd get picked up and stay at my dad's house, where everything felt staged, too quiet, too polite, too not mine. My half-siblings got their own rooms, matching bikes, Christmas pajamas. I slept on a pull-out couch and was told not to make a mess. My grandmother, my dad's mom, was the only one who made me feel like I belonged. She never treated me differently. Every summer, she'd drive me to her lake cabin in Twain Harte and say, "Don't let anyone tell you you're half anything. You're whole, sweetheart." After she got sick, I visited her almost every weekend. My Aunt Lisa didn't like that. She'd make comments like, "Oh, I didn't realize you were still around," or "Your father's been so busy with his real family." But Grandma never wavered. I helped her sort through bills, photos, her will drafts. Yeah, I saw them. There was one version she showed me, printed out, where each grandchild got an equal share. My name was right there next to my siblings. She even asked me once, "Do you think that's fair?" And I said yes. The last time I saw her alive was a week before she passed. She was weaker, couldn't talk much. My aunt was there, hovering. She asked me to step out because Grandma's tired. I did. That was the last moment I saw her awake. At the funeral, everything felt off. My aunt did all the talking, my dad barely made eye contact, and my half-siblings kept whispering. When I asked about the will, my aunt told me sharply, "It's been handled, you're fine." But a few months later, I started noticing things. My half-sister posted a TikTok showing off her new car, talking about grandma's gift. My brother said something in a group text about splitting what's left. When I asked what they meant, silence. That's when my dad texted, "There wasn't enough to go around, kiddo. Don't make this harder." I didn't push. I told myself maybe it was true, maybe there wasn't enough, until that voicemail from the lawyer proved otherwise. Now I can't stop thinking about all the little moments that didn't make sense. The hush-hush family meetings I wasn't invited to, the private phone calls, the time my aunt asked me weird questions about my mom's remarriage, like she was digging for legal loopholes. And now that I know there's a video of the will signing, I keep wondering who was actually on that call. Because if Grandma was as sick as she was when I last saw her, there's no way she could have signed anything by herself. Something tells me that video will show who really signed for her. And once I find it, I'm not just going to expose them. I'm going to take back what they stole. I didn't sleep much after that call with the lawyer. My mind kept replaying that Zoom snippet, my aunt saying I wasn't really family, my dad just sitting there silent. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was humiliation. Like I'd been erased while they laughed about it. So I started digging. First, I called the law firm back and asked if I could request a copy of the estate documentation for personal reference. The assistant said, "If you were listed as a beneficiary, yes." I said, "But I'm not sure if I was removed or not." That's when she went quiet. She finally said, "You might need to request a discovery under the California Probate Code if you believe something was altered improperly." So I did exactly that. I spent 3 nights learning everything I could about probate fraud. I learned how digital signatures had to be verified, how witness video calls needed timestamps, and how every change to a will needed confirmation of sound mind. And then I remembered something, my grandmother's tremors. She could barely hold a cup near the end. There's no way she could have written or signed anything. I emailed the lawyer again, asking politely if he could at least confirm who was present during the video signing. He responded a few hours later. "The participants listed in the digital session were your grandmother, your father, and your aunt, though it's unclear who controlled the video feed. There were also signatures from both your aunt and your father as witnesses." That's when I knew. My dad and aunt didn't just lie. They took her will and remade it themselves. But what really set me off was what came next. When I tried to bring this up in the family group chat, my aunt messaged me privately within seconds. "You're making a fool of yourself. Grandma wanted peace. Let it go before you make things worse for your dad." Worse for my dad. Not for her, for him. Something about that wording told me she was hiding something much bigger. So I called my mom. She's always tried to stay out of the drama, but when I told her what was happening, she got quiet. Then she said, "You know, your father always resented that your grandma kept in touch with me after the divorce. She told me once she wanted to make sure you got what was fair." I sat there, stunned. My grandma had told my mom that she was leaving me something, so that meant the version where I was included was the truth. That same night, I drove to my dad's house. I wasn't even thinking straight, I just needed to see him. Lori answered the door and froze when she saw me. My dad came out, tried to act casual. "Hey, kiddo," he said, like I hadn't just found out he stole my inheritance. I told him I'd spoken with the lawyer, that I knew about the Zoom call, that I knew there was a video. And the look on his face changed immediately. His jaw tensed, his eyes flicked toward Lori like he was waiting for her to step in. He said, "You don't understand how complicated things got at the end. Your grandma wanted things simple." I said, "Simple meaning without me?" He didn't answer. That silence was all the confirmation I needed. I walked out before I could start crying. But as I sat in my car, I decided I wasn't going to let them get away with this. If there was a recording of that will signing, I was going to see it, even if I had to find a way around the lawyer himself. And the next morning, I figured out exactly how to do it. It took me a week to get the video. I didn't hack anything, nothing shady like that. I just used the system against them. I filed an official request through the probate court, claiming I was an interested party due to being an excluded potential heir. It triggered a record release under public documentation. A few days later, a link appeared in my inbox from the law firm's records department. No password, just a plain subject line, "Requested recording, estate signing, L. Mayfield, March 2023. My hands were shaking so bad I had to steady them with my knees. I clicked the link and waited for it to load. It opened to a simple Zoom window. The timestamp in the corner said 3/02/2023, a week before my grandma died. And right there, frozen mid-frame, was her face. Except she didn't look like herself. Her eyes were half closed, head tilted, hands limp. You could hear someone whispering to her. Then my aunt's voice. "Mom, can you hear me? We're just finishing this up, okay? Just sign right here, remember?" She nodded faintly, but her hand barely moved. My aunt looked off-screen. "Just help her a little, okay?" And then, clear as day, my dad's hand came into the frame. He took my grandmother's wrist and guided it across the screen. You could see her signature wobble, her lips moving slightly. The lawyer on the other end said, "Is she able to confirm verbally that she's signing willingly?" My aunt interrupted. "She's tired, but yes, she understands. She told us earlier." No one ever heard my grandmother speak. The lawyer didn't push it. He just said, "All right, we'll proceed then." They smiled. They thanked him. They waved at the camera like nothing happened. And then, this part made my stomach twist. After the lawyer logged off, the recording didn't stop. My aunt turned to my dad and said, "You need to delete that old version from her files, the one with her name on it." Her. Me, my dad said, "Already done." Then my aunt laughed an actual laugh and said, "Good, one less mouth to feed." I slammed my laptop shut. It felt like the air had been punched out of me. They didn't just alter the will, they forged it. They used my grandmother's frailty to literally make her sign something she didn't understand. I called the lawyer immediately, shaking with anger. When I told him what I'd seen, he went quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Miss, I wasn't aware that session continued recording after I left." He promised to review the file internally, but I could already tell he was panicking. He was implicated. That night, I couldn't eat. I couldn't even cry. I just sat on the floor with that same thought looping through my mind. They didn't just take the money. They took the truth of who I was to her. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Because this wasn't just greed, it was deliberate. So I decided to fight dirty. I started planning, not some emotional outburst, not another confrontation they could dismiss. Something slow, cold, and legally bulletproof. Something that would ruin their image and make sure every dollar they stole burned before it ever bought them anything. For the first time in months, I slept because I had a plan. Not the kind where you shout and throw things, the kind where you make a list and check boxes until the other side has no comfortable lies left. Step 1 was preservation. I made 3 copies of that Zoom file, my phone, a thumb drive hidden in a book on my shelf, and an encrypted cloud folder I opened with a burner email. I did it quietly. If they were going to erase evidence, I wasn't giving them the chance. I also screenshot timestamps, the lawyer's ID, their names on the call. Little things that could not be waved away. Step 2 was legal pressure. I messaged the probate court clerk and asked about contesting a will on grounds of undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. I lied only in one sentence. I said I was exploring options because I didn't want to tip off my family that I was ready to move. The clerk gave me forms and the exact language used in successful contests. Undue influence, forgery, incompetence. Seeing those words printed out made the whole thing feel less like a personal meltdown and more like a case. Step 3 was the lawyer. I couldn't just accuse him without leverage. So I filed a formal complaint with the state bar for improper notarization and failing to confirm capacity, and I attached copies of the recording to my complaint. I also sent a calm, professional email to his firm, asking for an explanation of why the recording continued after he signed off, and why he hadn't verified verbal confirmation in the file notes. I kept my tone icy and precise. Anger is contagious, so is calm documentation. Step 4 was elder abuse channels. Using the recording, I made a report to Adult Protective Services and the county sheriff's office. I explained what I'd seen, a vulnerable woman manipulated during a legal signing. They opened a file and said they'd look into it. That was enough to make my aunt and dad start sleeping badly, I hoped. If the county had a case number, it meant social workers could subpoena professionals, ask the care facility for records, and dig into medication logs. That buried them in process. Step 5 was visibility. Money loses power when you shine a light on it. I drafted an anonymous email to a local journalist who'd covered elder care scandals before, attaching a redacted copy of the recording and a short, factual summary. No melodrama. Just the facts, dates, names, and the suggestion of a larger problem at the intersection of probate and family greed. I didn't send it yet. I wanted to wait until legal filings were in place. Lawyers and reporters both like momentum. While I was doing all of this, I also watched them, not stalking, just staying public. Instagram, Facebook, their little town posts. My aunt posted a photo of a dinner party the night after I got the video. My dad liked it within minutes. They were pretending normality. That only hardened me. I told myself the revenge had to be proportional. I didn't want to destroy people. I wanted accountability and the return of what was stolen. I wanted the record corrected, the will invalidated, and the lawyer called out for his part. I wanted my grandmother's real wishes to be the final word. When I finally filed the probate petition, I did it with surgical calm. I listed undue influence, lack of capacity, and a request to unseal all documents related to changes made in March 2023. I attached the recording as Exhibit A. The clerk stamped it with a case number. My hands shook when I left the courthouse, but the shaking felt like a sign that things were moving. I had set traps that didn't look like traps: paperwork, reports, press potential. And for the first time since the voicemail, I felt in control. They thought they'd cut me out because I was not really family. They were about to find out how loud family could be when it refused to be erased. 2 weeks after filing, I got a call from a blocked number. The voice on the other end was shaky but familiar. It was the lawyer's assistant, the same woman who had hesitated when I first asked about the will. She whispered, "I shouldn't be calling you, but you need to know your aunt isn't the only one who changed that document." I froze. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "There was another signature added after the notarization. Someone amended a clause. It wasn't your grandmother or your aunt." "Who?" Silence. Then she said, barely audible, "Your stepmother, Lori." That name hit me like a punch. Lori, the woman who'd smiled at me at the funeral, told me to let go of the past, who'd poured lemonade for me when I visited as a kid like we were just fine. I said she wasn't even blood. "Why would she touch the will?" The assistant said. "She added a secondary clause under your father's direction, an allocation for joint marital trust inheritance. It gave her control of half of what your grandmother left to your dad. That clause didn't exist in the original draft." She paused, then added, "It was done during a follow-up Zoom that wasn't on record, but I saw the audit log. Lori's email address is listed as an editor." My mouth went dry. "So she gets the money if he dies?" "Yes," the assistant said. "She already has access to the accounts. The transfer went through weeks after your grandmother's death. Your father doesn't own that money anymore." "She does." I hung up and just sat there staring at the wall. It wasn't just that my dad betrayed me. He'd handed everything over to a woman who didn't even share grandma's blood. The woman who always looked at me like I was some broken reminder of his first life. I needed proof, so I pulled up the court's public filings. Under the estate case, I found a trust registration from a few months ago. The trustee's name, Lori D. Mayfield. My father was listed as co-beneficiary. I realized then that my aunt wasn't the mastermind. She was the distraction. Lori had been the quiet architect, the one who stood in the background, smiling, while everyone else got their hands dirty. And that explained everything: the delete the old version comment, the coldness from my dad. He wasn't protecting my aunt. He was protecting his marriage. That night, I parked outside their house again. The lights were on, laughter inside. I could see them through the window, my dad and Lori at the kitchen island, glasses of wine, music playing. She touched his hand, smiling, and he looked at her like she'd saved him. All I could think was, "You sold your mother's legacy to the woman who wanted me gone." I left before they could see me, but I knew what I had to do next. The probate petition would make noise, but the trust was a separate entity. To hit them where it hurt, I needed to go after that trust. And to do that, I needed the one thing they'd tried hardest to erase: a record of my grandmother's original intent. Which meant digging through the one place they thought I'd never go, my grandmother's old care home. Because if I could find even one piece of paperwork with her original signature, even a note, a letter, anything that matched the old version of the will, I could unravel everything. I took a day off work, packed my car, and drove straight to the care facility in Sonora where she'd spent her last months. What I found there changed everything. The care home was quieter than I remembered, the smell of bleach and old flowers, the echo of soft TV sounds through half-open doors. The nurse at the front desk recognized me immediately. "You're Louise's granddaughter," she said. "You were the one who used to bring her the lemon cookies." Her words hit like a gut punch. Yeah, that was me. She led me to an office to wait for the administrator. While she was gone, I noticed a corkboard near the door covered in photos, residents smiling with family, handwritten thank you cards pinned up. And right there in the bottom corner was a photo of my grandmother. In the picture, she was sitting up, smiling faintly, holding a card that said to my favorite nurse, "Love you forever." But the handwriting, I knew it instantly. It was shaky, uneven, but still hers. It was dated 3 days after the supposed will signing. That meant she was still able to write something, and her message was affectionate, kind, conscious. It didn't match the barely aware woman in that video at all. When the administrator came in, I asked if I could check any of my grandmother's personal files, medication notes, signed forms, anything from early March. She looked hesitant, but when I mentioned the probate dispute, she sighed and said, "We keep copies of all consent forms. You can review them under family verification." She handed me a folder. Inside were pages of medical charts, signed releases, meal preferences, and then, near the bottom, a form authorizing temporary visitation restriction. The signature wasn't my grandmother's usual one. It was tight, almost printed, and it was dated the same day as the will change. The signature line for requested by Reed, Lori D. Mayfield. Lori had restricted access to my grandmother's room that week. I hadn't even known such a form existed. It meant that the day the will was changed, I legally couldn't visit her. I stared at that line until my hands went numb. When I asked the administrator about it, she said quietly, "Lori told us your grandmother was having trouble with too many visitors. We didn't realize you hadn't been allowed to say goodbye." That's when everything clicked. Every lie, every silence, every carefully timed moment. Lori hadn't just stolen money. She'd orchestrated isolation. She'd known my grandma loved me, maybe too much for her comfort, and she'd waited until my grandmother was too weak to object. I left the facility in a daze. But before I reached the parking lot, the nurse who'd remembered me caught up, holding an envelope. "This was in her drawer," she said softly. "We never mailed it. It's addressed to you." My breath caught. I opened it right there, my fingers trembling. Inside was a short note written in my grandmother's shaky script. "Sweetheart, I hope you forgive your father. He's weak, not cruel. But don't trust Lori. She wants what she can't earn. Promise me you'll fight for what's right, not what's easy. Love you always." I just stood there, clutching that paper like it was a heartbeat. That one letter, her words, was enough to destroy everything they'd built. It proved her state of mind, her clarity, her intent. It proved she knew what they were doing. But reading that line about my dad, "He's weak, not cruel," made me realize something darker. He hadn't masterminded this out of greed. He'd done it out of fear, because Lori had made him choose her or his past, and he'd chosen her. He'd chosen the woman who convinced him to erase his own mother's wishes just to protect his fragile marriage. And now I had her signature, my grandmother's note, and a video that tied them all together. I wasn't just going to win in court. I was going to make them live with what they did. The day of the hearing, Modesto was blazing hot. That kind of dry, bright heat that makes everything feel too sharp. I wore a plain black suit and kept my grandmother's letter in my bag, folded so many times the edges had softened. I sat alone in the courtroom, watching as my dad, Lori, and my aunt walked in together like they'd rehearsed it. Lori even had on a white blazer like this was brunch, not judgment. When the judge entered, my stomach flipped. I'd filed everything: the video, the care home form, the letter. I had spent every night organizing documents, notes, dates. My lawyer, a quiet, older woman with sharp eyes, whispered, "Don't speak unless I tell you to. You've already spoken with your evidence." The other side tried to keep their cool. My aunt said Grandma wanted to simplify things. My dad nodded along like a scolded kid, and Lori sat with her arms crossed, staring straight ahead. Then my lawyer played the video. The moment my dad's hand appeared guiding my grandmother's signature, I saw the air go out of him. The room was silent except for the hum of the projector. When it ended, the judge didn't say a word for a full minute. Then we showed the care home paperwork, Lori's signature on the visitor restriction. Then the letter. My lawyer slid the envelope to the judge like it was nothing more than another form. Your Honor, she said calmly, this letter was written 3 days after the contested signing. It references clarity, intent, and the very subject of undue influence. The handwriting matches earlier medical consent forms signed without assistance. Lori shifted in her seat, crossing her arms tighter. My aunt looked sick. My dad just stared at the table, jaw tight, breathing fast. The judge finally said, this court finds substantial evidence of manipulation and lack of testamentary capacity. The revised will is invalid. I didn't even realize I'd been holding my breath until that moment. The judge continued, all estate funds will be restored to the original distribution per the pre-amendment version. Further, this case will be referred to the district attorney for possible investigation of fraud. Lori's head snapped up. My dad turned pale. They tried to approach me afterward in the hallway. My aunt went first, saying, you didn't have to go this far. I said, you made sure I couldn't even say goodbye to her. I didn't go far enough. My dad looked like he wanted to speak but couldn't find words. I waited, but he just muttered, I'm sorry, and followed Lori out. 2 months later, I got a check from the estate, my rightful share. I didn't post about it, didn't brag. I just paid off my student loans and moved into a small apartment near the coast. Sometimes I still wake up thinking about that Zoom call, hearing my aunt's voice calling me not really family. She was right, in a way. Because family isn't the people who share your last name, it's the ones who don't sell your grandmother's soul for a payout. The investigation into Lori and my dad went further than I expected. The lawyer's firm quietly settled, the bar suspended his license for a year, and Lori lost her job at the insurance office after the story hit the local paper. I never had to send that email to the journalist. The truth spread itself. Now sometimes when I drive past the courthouse, I think about what Grandma wrote. Fight for what's right, not what's easy. She was right about Dad, too. He was weak, not cruel. But weakness is what lets cruelty happen. So I fought for both of us, and I won. The last line I wrote in my statement that day still feels like the perfect ending. They told me I wasn't really family. I just proved I'm the only one who still is.